this is usually fairly frightening.
I'm gonna make something great. That's my way.
Hey, how's it going? So I'm gonna try something out. I don't know if it's gonna work, but I'm gonna run the engine for a while, see where the actual sound is coming from. If you didn't see my last video with the rodknock, you can go check that out. Put in an engine and it's not. Anyways, I don't know if it's making noise from the top end or bottom. Gotta figure that out. So I'm gonna run it and see what happens and find out where that sound's coming from. The engine's running actually pretty good. Here I've got some ATF, which is automatic transmission fluid, and it has a lot of cleaning particles in it that will potentially help clean out some gunk that could possibly be in there in my lifters or bearings or anything like that. So I'm gonna put it in. I've got about this much. I would have liked the whole thing, but I'm not going to the store, so I found this at home. I'm gonna throw that in, let everything kind of clean itself out, and then do an oil change on it after about half an hour running and see what happens. But honestly, it's running pretty good. So I'm just letting her warm up. I do have high hopes right now that it isn't a rodknock. I originally thought it was. In the last video, you can see my face that I was worried. But it's sounding really, really good. So cross your fingers. I've got the ATF in there right now, and hopefully it'll just clean everything up. I wish I had a little bit more ATF, but I'll let it run as long as I need and do an oil change, and then maybe that'll fix it. I let it get up to temp. It's still running decent. Once in a while it'll misfire. I'm not sure if that's because the lifter's stuck or what, but it's not knocking. That is awesome. So after a few more minutes, I'm gonna give it a couple revs with the ATF in the oil. Now it's starting to miss again. What's happening is a valve isn't opening fully because the lifter's actually stuck. So I'm gonna just keep trying this and see if I can clear this engine up. It's been sitting for a long time, but I might have to take the top end apart and fix it by taking the HLAs apart and cleaning them.
This is honestly the most bizarre issue I've ever seen. How can an engine run fine and then all of a sudden run like crap, and then run fine again, and then run like crap? Changing nothing but revs. So odd.
Now now that ticking sounds back.
Now all 3 cylinders on this bank, which is the right head, they are not firing whatsoever. They're just along for the ride.
So these ones are running okay.
Here I'm about to unplug the far bank, and as you can see, it changes nothing. So they are not firing.
All right, so after a bunch of diagnosing and thinking with multiple people, I'm thinking that the valves are stuck open or not opening. It's kind of hard to tell the difference, but to me it sounds like the valves are stuck open because it's when I'm cranking it now, it doesn't sound like it has compression. So that could be just the air completely passing through the valves rather than having the valve shut and compressing that air. So I'm gonna rip off the intake and the valve covers, and I'm going to see what's going on. I've already checked all that stuff before, but why not check again?
Alright, it's time to get to work. I gotta get those valve covers off and check those HLAs because they could potentially be seized up or they could not be draining, so they could potentially be longer than they have to be, and that could be holding the valves open, and that's why I have 0 compression. It's very weird that this problem's intermittent, that it'll be all of a sudden running perfect and then all of a sudden running like a bag of shit. Timing's off, so gotta get those cams out, removing all the little caps.
All right, now I've got to take the cams out and then check all the lifters. They should be squishy. If they're not, it needs cleaned or replaced, but I'm gonna clean and redo all the insides and make sure there's no goop or anything in there because it makes them seize up. Okay, the reason why I've dug in here is because of the HLAs, and they're basically adjusters, so they fill up with oil, and when the more oil that they fill up with, the longer they are, and then the less oil they have, the shorter they are. So a collapse lifter is when it's like this, so it's shorter, and then you get that loud clacking. And if you have sticky HLAs, they could get stuck closed, they could get stuck halfway, they could get stuck wide open, and if they're stuck up wide open, it'll hold your valves open, so you definitely don't want that. So let's just check here. So like I said, they're supposed to be squishy. My thumb should be at least going in about 1/4 inch, and they are all literally rock solid, and that is not what I want. So what I've got to do is take them apart. So that is a good thing that I just saw, because that reassures that that was a problem. So you should use a magnet, but I don't have a magnet, so I'm just going to send it with these little needle nose. So I just gotta be careful, get a gripper on the edge and pull her up. So inside there's a small plunger. So this piece actually isn't part of this outside. This isn't one piece, there's 2 pieces in here. So I can literally grab this and pull that out, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do, get all the fluid out and then clean them. So there is usually, there's a little hole here, and that's how the oil gets in and out, right there. So you gotta clean that up, you gotta clean up in here. Okay, so these grips actually fit in nicely without touching the edges, so I'm just gonna go in there, grab the plunger, squeeze, twist, and then pull out.
and then there she is. So there's another piece in here. This is the actual adjuster right in here. So this is supposed to go in and out smoothly. It's seized. Why is it seized? Because there's just crap in it, guaranteed. So taking it apart, cleaning it up a little bit. I'm just doing a quick job just to show you how different it'll act once it's clean. So pouring out all this stuff, making sure there's nothing in the spring, pouring out the bad oil in here. So when I put the ATF in, I was suspecting that it would fix it because it's such a good cleaner, but see how there's a hole there also? That's how the oil gets in, but now it is squishy, and that is exactly what you want. So then you gotta get all this crappy oil out and then put your valve in, and then you can actually prime them. But I'll show you how to prime them later. But basically, this one's already looking good, but I have to clean it with brake cleaner and stuff. But I've got to do this to every one of them, and then I'm basically good to go. Okay, so here is the HLA that I've already loosened up. I'm gonna put it in to the same hole I took it out. That is very important as well. They have to be clean, and you have to make sure they go in the same spot. So all you do is you just drop them in. This one I can squish down almost all the way down to where it's flush at the head. Now we'll compare it to one of these. I literally can't move it an inch. Not one of these at all. So this engine's been sitting, and that is most likely the reason why I've got a problem. And I'm hoping that now my valves will shut. So I'm gonna take them out in pairs, and I am going to place them onto this piece of cardboard. So I got this sick workplace going on. I have a cooler that's full of coolant. This is gonna be my little bench. I've got my little cardboard piece here. It's actually pizza box. I actually ate them today. So basically we're good to go. And then I've got a little chair. So what I'm gonna do is place them all out so they go in the same orientation. So I'm just gonna get a pen and mark out all the spots, and then the left side of the head and the right side. This is the front of the engine where I was facing, and then this is closest to the center of the engine. So once I go back to put them in, I can just put one by one, and I remove them all one by one, so I actually have them in the proper orientation. If you take two out at a time, you're gonna forget where they go. Let's be real here. So this is what they're supposed to look like. That's the one I've already done, and I explained to you. All these don't move whatsoever. So I got them all apart here, and what I was doing was I was basically just taking them apart and then dumping them into the actual oil bin I've got here. And all the old oil that was in there is part of the issue because it's just old oil, and there's no way for it to come out really, especially if these get seized. Before, these were like locked like this high up, and I couldn't move them no matter how hard I pressed them. But now they're all free moving. I'm gonna put it into a bucket of oil and then just push on them until the air bubbles stop coming up, and then they're good to go, and drop them right in. All right, I don't really have an assortment of buckets at the moment, so I'm gonna cut this cat litter thing in half, and that's gonna be my bucket that I fill up with oil. So what I'm gonna do is grab one, drop it into here, pump it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, until basically you pump this until you get to like 1,000 times. So you go until there's no bubbles coming in. Pump it. Now there's no bubbles. So this thing is full of oil. Now I'm just gonna go drop it in the engine. So I'm just gonna run over here and then just drop that Jimmy Bob in there. And look how freely it moves. It's like very happy now. Before it wasn't very happy.
Alright, so now I'm just doing them all, just quickly throwing them into the engine and then moving on.
So they're all in, all done nice and properly. And as you can see, look how much they go down now. Before, literally, I was pushing as hard as I could and they couldn't move like a bit. Every single one of them. But now, every single one of them is moving very freely. And that's badass. Here are my cams. I'm going to clean them before I put them in, but the way you line them up, since there's two of them, is there's little paint marks from the factory. You gotta get them lined up just like so, and then they have to be put into the car like that. Sometimes you gotta get them like this, lined up, and then roll them away, then drop them in. I haven't done a ZE in a while, so I don't know how the cams work with these. But yeah, that's what I usually do in the Ds. Line them up, spin it a quarter turn, and then drop them in. But when you put this piece on, this is the end piece, okay? You have to RTV this, or you will have oil leaks. So you gotta RTV over here, and then over here.
The cams are all in. I just got to torque them up. Just torquing them up with a torque wrench, and I'm torquing them down to 15 pounds. This part's tricky. Right now I'm tightening down the cam gear, so you have to go in with like a wrench on the actual cam, and then you have to get a 17 in there with a breaker bar.
All right, I got the cams in. Now I'm gonna make sure they move freely, because if they're like binding in there, they will not move by hand. So those are obviously free spinning. So a good cam install is very important.
Now it's time to do the other head, so I'm taking off the valve cover, and then I'm going to take out the cams, take out the actual HLAs, just like I did on the other one.
Yeah, so all these are exactly the same. They're all solid, no cushion at all, and that's not how these are supposed to work. Like I explained before, these aren't solid lifters, they're HLAs.
Here's the priming process again. Basically, you just got to put them in there and push the plunger about 1.5 times. And back in they go.
Both cams on this side done, both cams on that side done. All of the HLAs are done. So now basically all I've got to do is time up this engine here. So what I've got to do first is I have to compress this cylinder. This is the tensioner for the actual timing belt. So I have to compress this all the way down and then stick an Allen key in there, because that's all I've got. So I've got to figure out a way to crunch this baby. I've got to compress this guy down until I can actually get this Allen key through all the way, so it'll hold it down while I get the timing set, and then I pull the pin, and then I'm Gucci. So what I've got for an idea here is I've got the car on a jack stand. So what I'm gonna do is lower it down and jack up this and use my car as my actual clamp to clamp this tight, because I don't have anything, so I'm gonna give that a shot. All right, so yeah, this is just underneath my car here, and honestly, I'm jacking up pretty hard, and I'm taking my time here because it's a hydraulic cylinder and it's gotta let the fluid by, but it's actually almost picking the car up. Almost there. All right, I'm gonna try. Oh, I think I got it. Yep. Got that all compressed up. She's ready for installation.
Okay, now I'm timing up the engine. I always start with the right cam gear because it's pretty much ready to go where it's sitting.
It's considered the left head all timed up to the crank, so I've just zip tied it on here so it can't skip.
since my crank and my left head are ready to go. So now I just need to go tooth by tooth, get these all lined up on the right cam, which is the one I'm working on currently, and then I should be good.
Okay, you see way down in there, I've got my tensioner right here, the hydraulic cylinder dude. So what happens is when you remove the bolts, like I did to get the old one out, it actually pulls the threads out. Most of the time you'll pull out all the threads. So this bolt has about 1/4 of an inch on the end where it doesn't have threads. This is the factory bolt. So what I do is, if I put this one back in, it won't catch any threads whatsoever. So what I do is I grab a longer bolt and then I cut the end off and make it the exact same length, and then put a lock washer on and go in nice and slow, take your time, and then it'll grab these 4 threads on the end, and that's just enough to make it work. Honestly, I've done this so many times and I've never had a problem. Basically, that's what I do, is take out the stock one and it always pulls out the threads, and then put in a longer bolt just to grab those fresh threads on the end. All right, now it's time to pull my little Allen key out because I'm in time. Looks perfect to me. Right at the tip of this knife, there's a mark right there, and then on the block head, there's a mark right there. So those are clearly marked, and clearly it's in proper time. 2 marks on the cam pulley, and then there's 2 marks on the valve cover. Those are clearly right on the money.
Alright, so now it's time to put everything back together and see if this thing is actually fixed.
So I've got really bad news. Same problem. The only gain I got from doing all that was my cylinder 3 now fires, which is great, but you need all 6, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take out the spark plugs, do a compression test, and then I'm going to see where I'm at with numbers. Like, I'm thinking they're pretty close to 0 because it's just going right out intake and exhaust. I think it's the valves. So I have a spare head. I have brand new head gaskets. I always keep this stuff like on deck. I've had these for 2 years. I've never done a head gasket in 2 years on one of these engines, and that's how long I've had this spare for. So got a spare head that's a ZE, and I've also got spare new head gaskets. So worst case, I'm gonna rip it off and see if it's piston or head gaskets, because I've got lots of ZE pistons and rods and heads. So I've got everything to fix this engine, unless the crank is bad and unless the cylinder walls are bad. But let's pray. Like, this is getting ridiculous. This should work, right? Because originally the engine fired up great. Now it has no power on 2 dead cylinders. So this is usually fairly frightening.